Thank you for watching videos by Family Travel Photos. Today is June 5th, 2021, and we're exploring some of the best spots at Grand Teton National Park, including Schwabacher Landing, Mormon Row, Jenny Lake, the Chapel of Transfiguration, and Menors Ferry. If you're planning a trip to the Tetons, stay tuned for great photos and helpful tips to make your vacation better. This is part of our series of travel vlogs and tutorials from our trip to Estes Park, Grand Teton National Park, Yellowstone, Cody, Wyoming, Devil's Tower, Mount Rushmore, and Badlands National Park. Click the subscribe icon in the lower right corner so you know when the next video will be released. June 5th started at 4 a.m. so we could get to Schwabacher Landing by sunrise. By the time we arrived, the parking lot was almost filled, but we managed to find a space. We walked the uneven trail from the parking lot all the way to its end for the best view of the mountains and the water.
The sun is coming up, and Jeff is here with his cameras.
Only 3 of them right now. I'm cutting back. The water was almost perfectly smooth, providing wonderful reflections as the sun rose. So we're just about done here at Schwabacher's Landing. Here for sunrise and the reflection off the water and the mountains as the sun comes up and illuminates the mountains. Turn this around so you can see how it looks now. Look at how smooth the water is. That's what you want. That's why you come here at this time of day. The wind isn't creating ripples. Here's a few tips for going to Schwabacher Landing. From Outer Road, the drive to the parking lot for Schwabacher Landing is about 1 mile. There are other places to stop along the way, but keep going until you literally can't go any further. You can hit the other places on your way back to Outer Road. Visit Schwabacher Landing for sunrise and sunset. Both are gorgeous. Expect crowds. It's best to arrive early to pick out the best spots. Bring a flashlight. The trail has lots of rocks and tree roots, and you may be walking in the dark. Leave yourself an hour to 90 minutes from the time you park until the time you leave. It may not take that long if you aren't using a lot of equipment. For camera equipment, I shot anywhere from 24 to 140 millimeters, which provided a good focal range for this setting. Whether you shoot video or stills, bring a tripod because you'll be shooting before or after hours of full sun. A tripod or gimbal is crucial for video because stillness is what makes this such a special scene. A remote shutter release is definitely recommended. From Schwabacher Landing, we made our way to Mormon Row. We first went to the John Moulton Barn. This is the barn that visitors go to most often, the one with the straight roofline, and set up there. The sun was still low enough in the sky directly behind me, so we had wonderful light for shooting the scene. The rustic old barn set against the beautiful Teton Mountains makes for one of the most remarkable scenes of our vacation. It's no wonder that this is referred to as the most photographed barn in the world. That said, Monique was more intrigued by the ground squirrels.
Yeah, these guys can take pictures of a barn. I'm getting the prairie dogs. Aren't they cute?
Next we drove north on Mormon Row Road to the intersection with Antelope Flats. We parked there and walked to the second barn with the angled roofline. This is known as the John Moulton Barn. Compare the rooflines of these two barns and you'll understand what I mean by straight roofline and angled roofline. Anyway, as with the first barn, the John Moulton Barn provides a remarkable photo setting, although there were more structures and fencing around this building, making it slightly less accessible to photograph. Here's some tips for visiting Mormon Row. The barns of Mormon Row are wonderful scenes to photograph, particularly in the mornings. The ground around the most commonly visited barn is literally covered with holes from the ground squirrels. Watch your step if you wander around the barn, and if you go before sunrise, take a flashlight. We got swarmed with bugs at this location. Don't forget your bug spray. Leave yourself a half hour to an hour to see and photograph both barns. For camera equipment, you can use a wide-angle lens, certainly. However, if you use a longer lens and zoom in on the barn, you can increase the size of the mountains in the background relative to the barn. Try standing farther away from the barn and frame your shot by zooming in just enough to capture the scene. You'll want a tripod and remote shutter release for sunrise shots, but once the sun is up, this is an easy setting to shoot with any camera. If you're enjoying this video and find the tips to be helpful, I hope you'll click the thumbs up icon and send a like our way. From Mormon Row, we decided to drive to Jenny Lake Visitor Center. This was more of a scouting trip. We planned to take the ferry across Jenny Lake on Sunday, and we wanted to confirm departure times and determine how long it would take to get from the parking lot to the ferry. We are at the parking lot for Jenny Lake. It is a little after 8, like 10 after 8, and the parking lot is already pretty well full. We're on the outer row of parking spaces, so there's the message. Get here early if you want a parking space. If you want to do the ferry ride over or go into the visitor center, get here early. We didn't spend much time at the visitor center other than to, check out the gift shop and restrooms. We looked at a topographical map of the mountains and headed out on a hike down to the lakeshore. When you plan your trip to the Tetons, be sure to leave a little time to walk along the shore and take in the stunning views of the mountains over the lake. The walk took about 15 to 20 minutes to reach the ferry dock, which was almost empty. We discovered the ferry was still on winter hours, starting service at 10 a.m. They wouldn't change to their summer hours, starting at 7 a.m., until June 7th. While we were taking pictures of the view from the ferry dock, I noticed a dog running along the walkway. It took a moment to realize it wasn't a dog, it was a fox. This situation illustrates one of my 19 tips for getting great pictures at the Tetons or Yellowstone, which is that you should always be ready to shoot a picture. You never know when you'll see a great shot like this. You can see all of my 19 tips for shooting great photos and videos at the Tetons and Yellowstone. The link to that video is in the upper right corner now. We spent some more time just walking along the shoreline. Honestly, we couldn't get enough of the magnificent view of the mountains over the water. At the risk of looking like a dork, I've decided to let common sense prevail, and I'm wearing a hat that has built-in sunscreen protection, and it goes back, as you can see, over the back of your neck. So hopefully I'll be able to minimize the amount of burning I do. Even though I burn very easily, the dorky looking hat kept my face and neck from burning the entire trip. I had a spare hat and Monique started wearing it for protection as well. You will find purchase links to these hats in the description below. Here's some tips for visiting Jenny Lake. Arrive early if you want to park in the Jenny Lake Visitor Center parking lot. It's about 9:30 and we're leaving Jenny Lake, pulling out of the parking lot, and you can see already people are having to line up along the road. The walk from the parking lot to the shore is probably 15 minutes. You can spend another half hour doing a leisurely stroll along the shoreline. This is an easy and very beautiful walk on a paved pathway that is well worth your time. You can also hike the 2-mile trek around the lake to the boat launch on the opposite side of the lake if you want to stretch your legs more. Morning is a great time to catch this view. The water was calm and the mountains and blue sky reflected perfectly in our images. You can spend a long time here if you want, just looking at the scenery. You don't have to, though. To walk to the ferry dock and back to the visitor center, leave yourself 45 minutes to an hour at least. Photographers will make the best use of their ultra-wide-angle to moderate telephoto lenses. The whole point of this scene is the mountains reflecting in the water. A long zoom lens won't help you here. No tripods are necessary for the still images, but if you're shooting video using a camera with a tripod, good in-camera stabilization, or a gimbal is a good idea to capture nice pans. We decided to give our feet a rest and take a drive along the Jenny Lake Scenic Drive, a short loop to the north of the lake. The first part of the drive offers a close-up view of the mountains, probably the closest you can travel towards the mountains by car. From this vantage point, they're almost overwhelming. Once the road curves to the left, you'll want to find a couple turnoffs. The first turnoff is the Spring Lake Trailhead. A short walk across the parking lot takes you to a beautiful running stream. Hikers can walk the bridge over the stream for a short stroll to Spring Lake. Standing on the bridge, you can see just how crystal clear this water is. We continued on Jenny Lake Scenic Drive to the Jenny Lake Overlook. This was another scenic view of the lake and the mountains. By the time we got here, it was later in the morning. As you can see here, the water was not as smooth and the beautiful reflections were gone. If you want to see the reflections at this location, get here early. Here's some tips for Jenny Lake Scenic Drive. The drive is short and worth the time. If you're not trying to get water reflection shots, you can do this one any time up to mid-afternoon. I imagine sunsets would be pretty nice here as well. This is a great activity to insert between hikes or long walks to give your feet a break. There are 3 overlooks on the drive, and all 3 are worth checking out. After you pass Spring Lake Trailhead, the drive itself isn't that scenic. It's the first part of the drive and the overlooks that make this a wonderful experience. Photographers, again, ultra-wide angle to mid-telephoto range will suit your needs. Spring Lake Trailhead offers some unique shots you won't find elsewhere, as you're shooting over a stream with rocks and logs. You may be able to use a longer lens here to create some shots with the bridge. As for Jenny Lake Overlook, there are lots of trees here, so you might not get the panning video shots at this location that you'll get over by the ferry dock. We finished the Jenny Lake Drive around 10:30 and decided to visit some sites that were close by on Inner Road. So our next stop was the Chapel of the Transfiguration, a lovely little church near Menors Ferry. The scene of this small chapel, with the backdrop of the Teton Mountains, is beautiful enough from the outside, but the real beauty is on the inside of the church. We got lucky. The chapel was open. As you can see, the church is a beautifully finished single-room log cabin. What's harder to tell from this image is that at the back end of the chapel is a large window with a spectacular view of the mountains. A cross stands in front of the window, providing a dramatic and inspiring scene. Here's some tips for visiting the Chapel of the Transfiguration. From what I understand, it's hit or miss as to whether the chapel is open or not, other than Sundays, of course. Either way, it's well worth your time to stop here. Remember, this is an active Episcopalian church, so be respectful when you visit. You won't need more than 15 to 30 minutes to visit this location, and when you're done, you can walk to Menors Ferry. Photographically, this is a tough setting because the interior is very dark while the sun is obviously as bright as day. Your camera is not going to be able to capture this extreme dynamic range. Your best bet is to try using a flash indoors, or set up on a tripod and shoot several photos, bracketing your exposure as you shoot. You can merge the photos later on. It's important that you don't touch the camera between shots, and you want to use a remote shutter release to avoid shakes. For video or cell phone, your best bet is to treat it as two separate shots. Capture the room from the back to get the interior, then move close to the window and expose for the sunlight. The Chapel of the Transfiguration actually shares a parking lot with Menors Ferry, and it's a 5-minute walk from one to the other. Menors Ferry is a collection of a few small buildings and an old ferry along the banks of the Snake River. We wandered the path through Menors Ferry and shot a few pictures, but honestly, I wasn't overly impressed with this stop on our trip. None of the buildings were open, although Monique took a couple shots through the window at one building. Here's some tips for visiting Menors Ferry. It's hard to tell from the maps, but to get to Menors Ferry, you park at the Church of the Transfiguration and walk. Don't go looking for a separate parking lot. There ain't one. If you need to cut something off your itinerary for the sake of time, this is probably the place I'd cut. There just isn't a lot to it. That said, it does have toilets, so if you're in the area and you need a restroom break, this is the place to go, literally. It's much less crowded than Jenny Lake Visitor Center, which is probably the next closest toilet area. Photographers. This is an easy spot. Daylight shooting from ultra-wide angle to long zoom lenses. By the time we finished at Menors Ferry, it was getting hot and we were hungry. We decided to head back to Teton Village to eat at the Mangy Moose restaurant. We got to Teton Village and reached the restaurant, but never managed to get food there. This is absolutely the most disorganized restaurant I've ever experienced. To keep this video short, I've detailed my experiences about the Mangy Moose in a separate video, which is linked in the upper right corner. Suffice it to say though, if I ever go back to Grand Teton National Park, I won't be going to the Mangy Moose. We spent a very crowded, hot, and sweaty few minutes at the Mangy Moose gift shop. Hey, the shirts are cool, what can I say? And then we wandered over to another restaurant in Teton Village, the Alpinhof Lodge. Again, to keep this video short, I put the review of Alpinhof Lodge in a separate video, linked in the upper right. If you want to find a place to eat in Teton Village, check this video out. By the way, we stayed the night at the Flat Creek Inn in Jackson. Do you need a hotel in Jackson to stay at while visiting Grand Teton National Park? Follow the link in the upper right corner to watch our short review. June 5th was a spectacular day at Grand Teton National Park. The scenes at Schwabacher Landing, Mormon Row, and Jenny Lake were epic, as spectacular as I hoped they would be, and the weather was utterly perfect. You see the photos of places like this and you think these locations can't be this beautiful, but they are. These majestic views are breathtaking, awe-inspiring, and even humbling. For Monique and me, today was all about looking at scenery and capturing it in photos and video, and it was a perfect day. In our next video, June 6th, we'll show you some more great places at Grand Teton National Park. We'll visit Snake River Overlook, where Ansel Adams shot his famous photo of the Tetons. Ride with us on the ferry across Jenny Lake and hike up to Hidden Falls. We'll take you to the Dornans, the best place in the park to eat and do your souvenir shopping. Then we'll drive up to the summit of Signal Mountain. People don't talk about this drive on YouTube, but it's a terrific drive with some spectacular views. We'll pass by the Chapel of the Sacred Heart and drive over a dam on our way to Oxbow Bend for some afternoon photography. Then we spend the evening at Summit Mountain Lodge in our cabin at Grand Teton National Park. Each of our vlog videos includes several tips to help you with your vacation, so if you haven't subscribed already, now's the time to do it. And hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when we publish again. Until then, check out more videos in our Wyoming vacation playlist on screen now. We'd love to see your comments and questions. Post them in the comments below.